this incredible work to try to remedy the imbalance on debates about Kashmir. And I know in this Parliament views are divided on the question, but I fear that too often the debates are very one-sided, and it is very sad that the tragedy of the Kashmiri Pandits we've heard about this evening so often is overlooked and isn't part of the narrative as it's spoken about in this Parliament. So I think this event this evening and the film that we've seen is a very important step towards deepening the understanding of parliamentarians into the real complexities of the situation in Kashmir and the grave injustice and tragedy which befell the Kashmiri Pandits. And I think for all future debates on Kashmir, we must make sure that they are even-handed, that they're balanced, that they recognise this injustice about which we've heard this evening in this very moving film that we've seen. And I commend you for what no doubt has been a very difficult task, and I commend those who've set up this event this evening to ensure that members of Parliament, peers and MPs have a better understanding of Kashmir. And like our first speaker this evening, I want to emphasise to all my colleagues that it is important to participate in debates on these issues, to make sure that the facts are properly ventilated and we get a fair, balanced, objective and truthful account of the situation in Kashmir. Thank you, everyone.
Kashmir is an issue that burns in many people's hearts on both sides of that divide. And I think one of the things I'd echo that Teresa has said is that the story of the Kashmiri Pandits is a story that's not told. It's not a story that's told, unfortunately, in Ilford too often. The stories of what have happened to people in the Pakistani side of Kashmir, their story is told on a regular basis, and I'm well versed in that. So for me, this is a process of education. It's a process of responsibility to my constituents, who this issue is incredibly important to. And as someone who champions human rights without fear or favour of any government, when we see and hear the evidence of real genocide, then it's important that we stand up and we speak out about that. And I think that has been the mission of this film. And so I'm actually looking forward to watching it in full. Perhaps myself and Nav will take the time to do that together and to discuss what we see. But I'm sure that the work that you've done both globally and here now in the UK will mean that this is an issue that British parliamentarians become more aware of. And that I think, I'm sure and certain that there will be debates here in the House of Commons that are put on, whether they're Westminster Hall debates, whether they're debates that are happening in the main chamber, that all of us can participate in, and that wider, more balanced hearing can potentially happen, in which actually the plight of the Kashmiri Pandits will be heard, and actually heard properly for the first time in these hallowed halls of democracy.
I want to thank Baroness Verma and my good friend Gagan for organising this event. I know Sharmaji is here as well. But leaving our politics at the door to express solidarity and support for the Kashmiri community. There are so many people. Agnihotri and Joshiji have been incredibly brave to put this project together. Let's be honest, not every India makes about 1,000 films a year, but not every film is commercially successful. So it is a big gamble to take on such a risky project, and they've put their life on hold to put this together. And it's very, very important that when, as Sam and Baroness Verma and Gagan and others have said, when we talk about human rights, it's very important that the Kashmiri Pandit community gets that representation. I know Lakshmi ji is here, Vinod ji is here, and actually there are people here from the wider Indian diaspora. My parents come from Uttar Pradesh, and I know there is people here from Uttar Pradesh Community Association, there are people here from south of India, and more importantly, there's a cross-party representation of MPs from Commons, but also Lords. So I hope that expresses our desire to make sure that these people get that representation. And the final point I will make, my mother comes from Gorakhpur in Uttar Pradesh, which is near Nepal border. My dad comes from Kanpur, in Uttar Pradesh, which is more central Uttar Pradesh. And my mum grew up traveling a lot into Nepal, but her immediate neighbors back in the day were Kashmiri Pandits, and I grew up from a little age listening to her about what happened to that family. And sadly, as I used to call him my mama, he's not with us anymore. But I grew up listening to the pain and the suffering that they suffered. So it's very important that we take a principled and fair stance on this issue and talk about these people. I haven't seen the film, but I make a commitment that I will watch the film. Although, as I said earlier, that 10-minute clip we saw earlier was incredibly painful. And it is not an easy watch, but I'm sure everyone in this room will agree that it's important that we get it out and we understand the complex issues. Once again, I want to reiterate my thanks to Baroness Verma and Gagan for putting this together, and of course the large Kashmiri Pandit community in the UK, and Agnihotriji and Joshiji. Thank you.
First, when you know, you have felt it, and I'm involved with the Kashmiri Pandits struggle quite a few years now. And I know the feelings, the people who suffered. But I would like to congratulate both of you, because I have gone through the system. It's not easy. It's not easy because even when we are living in a democratic system, some people don't believe in democracy, true meaning of democracy. So I congratulate both of you to take that courage to put it together. I think they deserve it. I feel that we are behind. The British Parliament is very behind the truth. They are not following it. And hopefully that after watching the movie, my colleagues from the House of Commons side will take it further. Gagan and others. There will be more debates. There will be more discussions. There will be more hostile environment. And I don't hesitate to give my words on that. There will be. And I think that I urge the community that you need to be more proactive. Make sure that parliamentarians who are the decision makers in this country follow the message given, but not through the film alone, but the individuals' experiences they have had in the past. We got a large Kashmiri population here. We need to take them with us. I don't think there's anything I can add at this stage, but certainly my support for the cause, making sure that it's recognized, genocide is recognized, people are protected and supported, and make sure that we have a peace in the region. That is best we can do. But congratulations and nice meeting you again after a long time. God bless. Thank you.
Like most of the people in this particular audience, we can talk about Kashmir, we can talk about Panditis. My first reaction when I came to this particular country, I lived in a place called Brighton, which is not far from Winchester, where Lord Mountbatten lived. And I think at that time he was very much in public eye. And I remember writing to him at that particular stage that if there is one person who should have taken a decision about resolving the issue of Kashmir, it was him, not leaving it aside on one side and coming back to England hoping that the thing will sort itself out. It never did, because when I, in 1980s, was invited by Bajpayee, the Prime Minister, to visit Kashmir with a delegation of Liberal Democrats here, we went along. The first thing he asked me, what would you like to see? And I said, I'd like to go and see what's going on in Kashmir. We talk about Pandits, But that is where I was able to meet 500 to 600 Pandits crowded in a room, pleading for their particular homeland, pleading for their homes, pleading for the injustices that were done to them. And when I looked at this particular case, and I couldn't believe that here we are, shouting about Rwanda, shouting about what's going on in Bangladesh and other parts of the world when we talk about genocide. And yet hardly anybody is talking about what is happening to the Pandit community in that part of the world. That gave me an insight, a tremendous insight on the plight of Panditji, but more importantly, what Kashmir was. We were led by a delegation, but the delegation was supported by at least half a dozen military cars taking us to see different parts of Kashmir, to see how locked up the place was. And there was hardly any freedom that one could talk about. I want to see Kashmir. I always said that when God created this world, and then he more or less talked about all sorts of things in relation to good things that people can do. When he created Kashmir, I call it a Garden of Eden, one of the most beautiful places in this world. We were taken to all parts of Kashmir to look what was going on. And I don't think one could have visualized the beauty, the warmth of people, and more importantly, the way Kashmir was projecting itself in terms of the issues that are got to be discussed and got to be resolved. I'm hoping very much when I came back to Delhi and talked to Prime Minister Vajpayee, he said, what is it that you learned about Kashmir? I said, I learned something that I would never imagine that I could believe that was true. The separation of people from their homeland, the shops and everything that was closed, that you have to walk about militaries regarding you all along, so you felt safety in that particular surrounding. He said, what do you think you want to do? I was the first one to be awarded the Bharatiya Pravasi Divas Saman Patra in India. And I said, this sort of thing should belong to people of Kashmir, people who have been fighting for their rights, for their liberties, and for their freedom. And I don't think we should ever forget that. One of the things I often said, and I think we do all three as political parties in the House of Lords, there are people in this particular country who arrived in the United Kingdom very much seeking asylum and then nationality, British nationality, because they felt that they were unfairly treated in Kashmir. Many of these people are in parts of the constituencies in various parts of this particular country, and they exercise a tremendous amount of pressure. There are few of us who get an opportunity to go beyond Kashmir to talk about other issues. But whenever I hear these people, you will see that any one of us will get up to talk about the democracy in India. This is the world's oldest democracy, but we then talk to them about the world's largest democracy, that is India, and the way it is behaving to the rest of the world. We want to ensure, and I think the one word that you talked about is the question of humanity, the human rights, the basic value that all of us have in one country, one nation, one people, both together can speak with the same voice. That is what we are doing, and that's why you're all over here. All we can promise you is that whenever issues come in, we won't get up in every particular instances because the time scale is very limited in the loads of the contribution you could make. But whenever we got the opportunity, we will certainly use this example of Panditjis and our particular problems and difficulties. But more importantly, we will continue to make sure that the word of Kashmir is not forgotten, that people realize that real truth is not when you shout about what's going on by making representation of the other side in this particular country, but looking very much at the evidence that is being presented in this beautiful film and the projection of the contribution that you have made, that we'll be able to bring this sort of issue forward. Ultimately, at the end of the day, whenever we look at Kashmir, we will be looking at justice, liberty, and peace for people who are Pandits, who are from that part of the world, and for them, we pray that things will work out in the best possible manner. Thank you very much.
as ever, I think my fellow parliamentarians have spoken well and from the heart, and you've given them a very warm response. I'm not sure there's a great deal that I can add, but let me just say 2 or 3 things. First of all, my academic background is as a historian. I read history at Oxford, and you can't have a debate about the future, and you can't have a debate about the past without a fair, balanced telling of history. And it is true that in this country and too many other places around the world, this story has not been properly told or understood. So I'm looking to my parliamentarian colleagues to be courageous, but also inquisitive, to understand the story and then speak about it. And I probably don't need to say this to several people in the room from the Kashmiri Pandit community. Certainly I have representatives from Woking here, but I think the courage of our film directors and those who acted in the film, knowing that it would put their life potentially under threat and that life would not be the same again. I think everyone in this room and beyond should show a similar courage to always stand up and tell this story and tell this truth and make sure it is understood as part of the sad and difficult history of modern Kashmir. And I think and really that's all I wanted to say. I wanted to pay tribute to the bravery and creativity of our filmmakers, and just I think we all know in this room that in this country that balanced history is not understood, and it needs to be. It needs to be. It must be.